I grew up in a time of great children's movies. When I was a kid, there was all of this new animation technology. We had stories highlighting other cultures, though sometimes in troublesome ways, I'll say. And we had songs so catchy that I still catch myself singing them today. And when together with friends, we often find ourselves playing a Disney playlist. Now, my favorite Disney movie, or my favorite movie as a child, was Lion King. And I think that we can all agree that that is one of the greatest movies of all time. If you disagree, you're just wrong. But 2 years before The Lion King, when I was 2.5 or 3 years old, came Aladdin. And when I was old enough to watch it, I did. And I think that most of you, I hope, have seen Aladdin. If you haven't, I'll give you a quick summary. So Aladdin is this orphaned young man, or really more likely a boy. He roams the streets with his best friend and monkey, Abu. They steal food, but only to eat, or only to hand a loaf of bread to a child looking up at him with hunger-glazed eyes. Immediately, you like this kid, because he's singing an awesome song, and because he tries with what little resources, basically none, that he has to help those who need it. So we see Aladdin. He's being chased by the cops for stealing. He ends up in some abandoned building where he comes across a woman, shrouded in cloth, but we know right off the bat that this woman is beautiful. And it turns out that she's the princess, Jasmine. Now, throughout a course of events, they develop a crush, of course, which is to be expected. And then the king is oblivious to what's going on around him, and he's being hypnotized by his closest advisor, who wants to marry the princess for himself to gain power. And in the meantime, Aladdin goes off and he gets help from a genie in a bottle. It's all very realistic, you see. And that's the gist of the beginning. And then for the rest of the movie, we see Aladdin and Jasmine kind of working their way back to each other in their broken world, where those who have the means are fighting dirty to gain more power and wealth, and those who aren't at the top are constantly falling back to the bottom, where they have to steal in order to eat. Now, when Aladdin is basically courting Jasmine, he goes to Jasmine's room in the palace in an unconventional way. He goes on his magic flying carpet, and he convinces her to go for a ride with him. Again, it's really realistic. And so on this magic carpet ride, he, of course, sings her a song. He paints her a picture of the kind of world that he hopes for, a whole new world. And as they zoom around the globe and see all of the wonders of the world in a mere 3 minutes, he sings of a whole new world, a dazzling place he never knew. Now, you're going to leave here today with this song stuck in your head, and you can remember me fondly as you sing it throughout the day. And though this song is a love ballad, if you look or listen a little closer, you'll see that the song expresses a desire for something new, and more importantly, for something radically different. For in this world that Aladdin hopes for, a princess and a scoundrel can be together. In this world that he hopes for, people aren't so consumed with pride and status. It's a world where love prevails and the hungry don't have to steal food anymore, where the unimaginable becomes the new normal. A whole new world, he sings to Jasmine, a new fantastic point of view, no one to tell us no or where to go or say we're only dreaming. You see, Aladdin is giving Jasmine this vision of a new world, a world that she could never have imagined, but in the end, a world that is possible. Aladdin is singing about a world in which everything is turned upside down, where tables are flipped and the least of these end up with the biggest blessing, where the lowest in society are raised up. What we are talking about is a society that doesn't rely on status or wealth to determine a person's dignity. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a Jesus thing to me. And even as children, we are shown and we see for ourselves that there are inequities around us, and then we're shown that to fix these problems, take something out of a fairy tale. That for love to prevail, it would take a resourceful kid, a genie in a bottle, and a magic carpet ride. And while that can be frustrating, while I wish that we saw more examples of how ordinary people make a difference, I do think that they're onto something in this story. You see, this change, this new world that Aladdin sings of, and that we so wish for, it does require something extraordinary. It does require some kind of magic, something outside of our own human abilities. And Aladdin is saying, bear with me, trust me, and we can have a whole new world. And again, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a Jesus thing to me too. Because Jesus is saying in our gospel reading today, trust in me. He's saying, look, this is what my new vision of a world will look like. But if you're suffering, you have to put your trust in me. And if you happen to have more than you could ever need, you need to reevaluate your life. You need to stop placing all of your value and trust in the earthly things and put your whole trust in me, in Jesus. This new world that we so badly need, we can't have it without Jesus. It does take something outside of our normal human capabilities. It takes a vision, a promise, a willingness to change. And it takes hope. A hope in what is possible if we put our trust in the love and grace of God. And as wild as it seems, Jesus shows us that it is possible. That he does promise a world full of hope and love, a world flipped over and so different than we could ever imagine. And of course, he isn't leaving us to figure it out on our own. He's constantly trying to get his disciples and to get us to understand what it will take. Throughout his teachings, we get glimpses of what this new world looks like, a complete reordering of society where we are all loved, where we all have what we need, where hunger and thirst are no more. But in order to live into this kingdom that he's promising, we have to put all of our trust in God. That's what Jesus is trying to get through to all of those around him. And he's been trying to get it through to them and to us from the very beginning. You see, we don't have this comes right before where our gospel starts today, but just before the Beatitudes, he chooses his apostles. Our scriptures say he spent night in prayer, and when day came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles. Simon, whom he named Peter, and his brother Andrew, and James, and John, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. And then he goes up onto the mount, and he says these things to the apostles and disciples on that beautiful hillside. He gives all of these blessings. Actually, I'm kidding. I hope you were confused there for a second. You should have been, because that wasn't our gospel for today. That's Matthew. Jesus goes up onto the mount in Matthew, which is perhaps one of the more often used versions of the Beatitudes, but not in Luke. Luke, our gospel for today, has Jesus coming down off of the mount. In Luke's version, Jesus comes to a level place. I love that about this version. Jesus isn't speaking to his disciples from a high place or a place where only a select group can get to, but he comes down to be among the people. He's on their level. With the newly chosen apostles and the disciples and the people who have followed to be near him, the suffering who have come to be healed, he has come down to them, to all of them, all made equal on a level plane, all together, all hearing these same words of Jesus in the same moment. And then right off the bat, he tells them that it's not easy, that they can't even begin to understand what it will be like, but to get a glimpse, they're going to have to give up what they have and trust in Jesus enough to follow him. They're going to have to learn that the things that they have all come from God. And all of those things that they think they need, they really don't. Because the only thing that they need is the love and grace offered only by God. Love and grace offered especially to the poor, and to the hungry, and to those who weep, now and in this place. To those who find themselves so desperate, yet still put their trust in God. Those who trust when trusting seems to be the hardest possible thing. Because this new world order that Jesus promises requires a sacrifice. The poor and the hungry will be blessed, and those who have more than enough and keep it all for themselves must turn away from those earthly desires, repenting and turn to the Lord for all of their strength. Jeremiah reminds us of the same thing. Cursed are those who trust in mere mortals and make mere flesh their strength, whose hearts turn away from the Lord. The message of Jesus in the Beatitudes is a message of hope for the poor and a call to repentance and amendment of life to the rich, which, if we admit it, can be hard to swallow for those of us who don't hunger every day. Where do we put our trust? In the everyday comforts of our lives and our own achievements and our riches? Or do we put our trust in God? You see, salvation is not about prosperity in the here and now on this earth. We don't need all of the stuff that we have. Salvation is about the kingdom that God intends for us. And placing trust in the disposable things of this world instead of in that trust in the world that Christ intends for us is not what is intended for us. Holding our wealth for our own instead of sharing it is not what Jesus is calling us to do. For everything that we have in this world comes from God, and it's intended to be shared. Nothing we have accomplished was done by us alone. But the temptation of our society is to take all the credit for our own success. And in doing that, we easily forget where our trust really belongs. But when we find ourselves down, poor and hungry, ridiculed by those around us, when we take on a status that society might judge, that is when we remember from whom all blessings flow. It is in those places that we remember to turn to God and ask for guidance, to pledge ourselves and our trust to the one who promises a whole new world. Because Jesus came to us in this very broken and suffering world to show us the way to him. And to those in the most broken places and systems of the world, he offers hope. And he promised his vision of a new world, a new fantastic point of view. Even if people tell us that we're only dreaming, when we place our trust and hope in the Lord, only then do we truly receive the blessings promised to us in the Beatitudes. Amen.